My name is Ada Thompson, and at 54 years old, I thought I knew what betrayal looked like. I had weathered a difficult divorce, raised my daughter alone, and built a life of quiet strength in our little Colorado town. But sitting in that neurologist's office 3 months ago, staring at the MRI images of the tumor growing in my brain, I never imagined the deepest cut would come from the person I trusted most. The person who promised she would always be there for me. The person who chose Disney World over her mother's brain surgery. Before I share this story that changed everything I believed about family loyalty, I want to know where you are watching from today. Please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength when the people we love let us down. Now let me tell you how I discovered that sometimes the most important surgery you need is cutting toxic people out of your life. 3 years ago, when my husband Robert passed away from a heart attack, I thought the worst pain of my life was behind me. Robert and I had been married for 26 years, and losing him left a hole in my chest that felt like it would never heal. But I had Sarah, my 31-year-old daughter, who swooped in during those dark months with casseroles and tissues and promises that we would get through it together. Sarah had always been my pride and joy. After her father and I divorced when she was 8, it was just the two of us against the world. I worked double shifts as a substitute teacher and weekend shifts at the local diner to put her through college. I never remarried, never dated seriously because Sarah was my focus. Every sacrifice felt worth it when she graduated summa cum laude and landed a marketing job in Denver. Now Sarah was married to David, a decent man who worked in insurance, and they had 2 beautiful children, Emma 7 and Jake 5. They lived about an hour away in a nice suburban neighborhood with a 2-car garage and a swing set in the backyard. The American dream I had worked so hard to give her. Every Sunday they would drive down for dinner at my house, and Sarah would catch me up on her busy life while the kids played in my garden. Those Sunday dinners were the highlight of my week. My house in Colorado Springs was modest but comfortable. A 3-bedroom ranch-style home with a wraparound porch where I grew tomatoes and sunflowers every summer. After retiring from teaching 2 years ago, I had settled into a peaceful routine of volunteer work at the animal shelter book club meetings and tending my garden. The neighborhood was quiet, filled with other retirees and young families. My next-door neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, had become a close friend over the years, and we often shared coffee and gossip on our adjoining porches. Life felt stable, predictable, safe. I had my health, my modest pension, and most importantly, I had Sarah. She called me every few days, sent photos of the grandkids, and never forgot my birthday or Mother's Day. I believed we had the kind of mother-daughter relationship that would last forever. I believed that the love I had poured into raising her had created an unbreakable bond. I believed that family meant showing up for each other no matter what. I was about to learn how naive those beliefs really were. The headaches started in early March. At first, I dismissed them as stress, or maybe too much screen time from helping coordinate the church's online fundraiser, but as the weeks passed, they became more persistent, accompanied by dizziness that would hit me at random moments. One Tuesday morning while watering my sunflower seedlings, I suddenly felt the world tilt sideways and found myself sprawled on the wet grass, my watering can rolling across the yard. Mrs. Patterson saw me fall and insisted on driving me to the emergency room. The young doctor there ordered a CT scan and found something that made his face go very serious very quickly. He referred me to Dr. Williams, a neurosurgeon at Presbyterian St. Joseph Hospital, and managed to get me an appointment for the next week. That was the longest week of my life. When I called Sarah to tell her about the fall and the upcoming appointment, her voice immediately filled with concern. "Mom, you should have called me right away. Do you want me to drive down and go with you?" I told her I could handle the appointment myself, but promised to call her the moment I knew anything. She made me swear to keep her updated and said she was already looking into taking time off work if needed. The morning of my appointment with Dr. Williams, I sat in the waiting room surrounded by other patients with worried faces and family members holding their hands. I wished Sarah was there with me, but she had an important presentation at work that day. Dr. Williams was a kind man in his 50s who explained everything in careful detail. The MRI showed a meningioma, a typically benign brain tumor, but it was located in a spot that was causing pressure and needed to be removed surgically. The good news is that these tumors are usually not cancerous, he said, pointing to the white mass on the computer screen. The challenging news is that we need to operate soon. The tumor is 3.2 centimeters and its location is causing your symptoms. If we wait much longer, you could experience more serious complications. My hands were shaking as I called Sarah from the hospital parking lot. Brain surgery, I managed to say when she answered. Mom, oh my God, I'm coming down right now, she said immediately. No, honey, finish your workday, but Dr. Williams wants to schedule the surgery for next Friday. There was a pause. Next Friday. That's only 10 days away. Her voice sounded strange, but I attributed it to shock. We talked through the logistics. She would take the entire week off to help me prepare and be there for the surgery and recovery. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the tumor growing in my head, stealing space from my brain. I wrote letters to Emma and Jake just in case something went wrong. I organized my important papers and gave Mrs. Patterson a spare key, but mostly I felt grateful that Sarah would be there with me through this frightening experience. That was what family did. That was what love looked like. Sarah arrived that Tuesday evening with her overnight bag and a nervous energy that seemed unusual. She hugged me tightly and made my favorite chicken casserole for dinner, but I noticed she kept checking her phone throughout our conversation. When I asked about work, she seemed vague about the details of taking time off. Everything's handled, she said quickly, then changed the subject to the kids' upcoming school activities. The next few days were a whirlwind of pre-surgery appointments. Blood work, another MRI meetings with the anesthesiologist and surgical team. Sarah came with me to most of them, but she seemed distracted, often stepping outside to take phone calls. When I asked about these calls, she said it was just work tying up loose ends before her time off. Wednesday evening, while we were reviewing my discharge instructions, Sarah's phone rang again. She answered it in the kitchen, and although I tried not to eavesdrop, I could hear tension in her voice. When she returned, her entire demeanor had changed. She sat down across from me at the dining room table and took a deep breath. Mom, I have to tell you something and you're not going to like it. My stomach dropped. David's company is sending him to Los Angeles for a crucial client presentation. It's a last-minute thing and it could mean a promotion for him. The thing is, they need me to come too for the marketing support. It's this Friday. Friday. Surgery day. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. I know the timing is terrible, but this opportunity could change our financial future. David could become a regional manager. We could finally afford the house we've been looking at. She reached across the table and took my hand. You'll be fine, Mom. Dr. Williams said this is a routine procedure. Mrs. Patterson can drive you to the hospital, and I'll be back by Sunday to help you recover. The room felt like it was spinning, and it wasn't from the tumor. Sarah, this is brain surgery. What if something goes wrong? What if I don't wake up? Her grip on my hand tightened. Don't say things like that. You're going to be perfectly fine. This is just bad timing, but I can't pass up this opportunity for David's career. I wanted to scream. I wanted to remind her of all the times I had put her needs before everything else. But instead I just nodded and said I understood. because that's what mothers do. We sacrifice. We understand. We support our children's dreams even when it breaks our hearts. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood perfectly. Mrs. Patterson knocked on my door at 6 a.m., holding a thermos of coffee and wearing her most encouraging smile. "Ready to get this tumor evicted," she said with forced cheerfulness. I appreciated her effort, but nothing could fill the hollow feeling in my chest where my daughter's support should have been. At the hospital, the registration nurse asked for my emergency contact information. "My daughter," I said automatically, then realized Sarah wouldn't even be reachable during surgery. "Actually, let me give you my neighbor's number too." Mrs. Patterson squeezed my shoulder and promised to stay in the waiting room the entire time. The pre-surgery routine was a blur of changing into hospital gowns, answering medical questions, and signing consent forms. Each nurse who came into my pre-op room asked about family members who would be waiting, and each time I had to explain that my daughter had a work emergency. I could see the confusion and sympathy in their eyes. What kind of work emergency was more important than your mother's brain surgery? Dr. Williams stopped by to review the procedure one more time and ask if I had any final questions. "Doctor, what are the real risks here? I need to know the truth." He sat down next to my bed. "Ada, in experienced hands, this surgery has a very high success rate. But any brain surgery carries risks. Infection, bleeding reaction to anesthesia. There's a small chance of damage to surrounding brain tissue, which could affect speech or movement. That's why we usually recommend having family nearby during recovery." As they wheeled me toward the operating room, I tried calling Sarah one more time. Straight to voicemail. Her cheery voice saying she couldn't come to the phone right now but would call back soon sounded like mockery. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine Robert holding my hand, telling me everything would be okay. The anesthesia mask came down over my face, and my last conscious thought was wondering if I would wake up to find anyone who truly cared about me waiting in that recovery room. 4 hours later, I opened my eyes to fluorescent lights and the steady beeping of monitors. A recovery nurse named Janet was checking my pupils with a small flashlight. "Welcome back, Ada. Surgery went perfectly. Dr. Williams got the entire tumor out cleanly." My head felt like it was wrapped in cotton, and speaking was difficult, but I managed to ask if anyone was there to see me. Janet's face showed that familiar sympathy again. "Your neighbor is in the waiting room. She's been here the whole time." Mrs. Patterson, not my daughter. Mrs. Patterson, who barely knew me before my husband died. Mrs. Patterson, who had shown more loyalty in one day than my own child. The next 3 days in the hospital passed in a haze of pain medication, neurological tests, and visits from Mrs. Patterson and a few women from my book club. Sarah had sent flowers with a generic get well card and called twice, both conversations brief and awkward. She was still dealing with the Los Angeles situation, but promised to check on me as soon as she returned. Sunday morning, Dr. Williams cleared me for discharge. "You'll need someone to drive you home and stay with you for at least the first few days," he said while reviewing my discharge instructions. "Head injuries can be unpredictable, and you shouldn't be alone." Mrs. Patterson had already volunteered, bless her heart, but it felt wrong accepting so much help from someone who wasn't family. The drive home was uncomfortable, every bump in the road sending shooting pains through my skull. Mrs. Patterson helped me into my house and got me settled on the couch with extra pillows and a glass of water. She had stocked my refrigerator with easy meals and promised to check on me every few hours. "You just focus on healing," she said, patting my hand. "I'll handle everything else." That afternoon, Sarah finally called. "Mom, how are you feeling? I'm so sorry I couldn't be there, but the Los Angeles meetings ran longer than expected. David's presentation went amazingly well, though. He's probably going to get the promotion. She sounded upbeat, almost giddy, and completely oblivious to how abandoned I felt. The surgery went fine, I said quietly. Dr. Williams said he removed the entire tumor. There was a pause. See, I told you everything would work out perfectly. You worry too much, Mom. I'll drive down to see you once things settle down here. After I hung up, I sat on my couch staring at the flowers she had sent. Beautiful roses and lilies arranged in an expensive vase. The kind of flowers you send when you feel guilty, but don't want to admit you've done anything wrong. I found myself wondering when my daughter had become someone who could abandon her mother during surgery and then act like it was perfectly reasonable. Tuesday morning, my friend Margaret stopped by with a pot of homemade soup. Margaret and I had taught at the same elementary school for 15 years before we both retired. She was one of those people who always knew the latest news about everyone in town, and I usually enjoyed her gentle gossip. But that day, she seemed unusually hesitant to chat. Ada, I hope you don't mind me asking, but is everything okay with Sarah? I saw something on Facebook that seemed a little odd considering your surgery and all. Margaret pulled out her phone and showed me the screen. I know you don't do social media, but I thought you might want to see this. My blood turned to ice water. There on Margaret's phone was Sarah's Facebook page featuring a photo of her family standing in front of Sleeping Beauty's castle at Disneyland. All 4 of them were wearing Mickey Mouse ears and huge smiles. Emma was holding a balloon shaped like Minnie Mouse, and Jake was clutching a stuffed Goofy. David had his arms around Sarah, who was beaming at the camera like she didn't have a care in the world. The caption read, "Amazing family vacation. The kids are having the time of their lives at the happiest place on earth." The date stamp showed Friday, the exact day I had been lying on an operating table having my skull opened. I stared at that photo until the image burned itself into my memory. My daughter, the person who had raised me to believe that family always comes first, had been riding Space Mountain while I was having brain surgery. She had been taking selfies with Disney characters while I was wondering if I would survive the anesthesia. She had been buying overpriced Mickey Mouse ears while I was lying alone in a recovery room. Margaret's face was full of concern and confusion. "I'm sure there's some explanation," she said gently, but we both knew there wasn't. There was no explanation that would make this okay. No excuse that would justify this level of betrayal. "Margaret, would you mind taking some screenshots of this? I need to see all of it." With shaking hands, Margaret scrolled through Sarah's recent posts. There were dozens of photos from what was obviously a multi-day Disneyland vacation. Pictures of the family at breakfast in the Grand Californian Hotel. Videos of the kids on the Matterhorn. A photo of Sarah and David sharing a romantic dinner at the Blue Bayou restaurant. Every single post was dated during the week I had been preparing for and recovering from surgery. While I had been writing goodbye letters to my grandchildren, Sarah had been planning character breakfast reservations. While I had been lying in a hospital bed with drainage tubes coming out of my head, she had been posting about magical memories with my amazing family. The most devastating part was how genuinely happy she looked in every photo. There was no trace of worry about her mother's condition, no sign that she was thinking about anyone outside of her immediate family's fun. She looked like a woman without a care in the world, certainly not like someone whose mother was undergoing major surgery. Margaret stayed with me while I processed this information, bringing me tissues and tea as I cycled through shock, rage, and heartbreak. "What kind of daughter does this?" I asked her. "What kind of person lies to their mother about being on a work trip and goes to Disneyland instead?" But even as I asked the question, I was beginning to understand exactly what kind of person Sarah had become. She had become someone who prioritized her own family's happiness over her mother's life. Someone who could lie smoothly and convincingly when it served her purposes. Someone who saw my medical crisis as an inconvenience to be avoided rather than a moment when her mother needed her most. I spent 2 sleepless nights deciding how to confront Sarah. Part of me wanted to call her immediately and scream about the betrayal. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the sweet little girl I had raised alone, hoped there might be some explanation that would make sense of this horror. Wednesday evening, Sarah called with her usual cheery voice. "Hi, Mom. How's recovery going? I'm planning to drive down this weekend to check on you and bring the kids to see Grandma." She sounded so normal, so loving that for a moment I almost doubted what I had seen. "How was Los Angeles?" I asked carefully. "Oh, it was intense but really productive. David knocked his presentation out of the park. The client was so impressed they're expanding the contract. It looks like the promotion is practically guaranteed now." She continued spinning her elaborate lie with the ease of someone who had been practicing it for days. She described fictional meetings and imaginary hotel rooms and non-existent client dinners. Every word was delivered with complete conviction, as if she truly believed her own story. "That's wonderful news about David's success," I said when she finished. "You must be so relieved that the work trip went well." There was the briefest pause. "Yes, exactly. It was stressful being away during your surgery, but sometimes you have to make sacrifices for the family's future, you know." The casual mention of sacrifice made my vision blur with rage. "Sarah, I need to ask you something and I want you to tell me the truth. Were you really in Los Angeles for work last week?" The silence stretched so long I thought the call had been dropped. When Sarah finally spoke, her voice had completely changed. Gone was the warm, loving tone. In its place was something cold and defensive. "Why are you asking me that?" "Because Margaret saw your Facebook posts. Because I know you were at Disneyland with your family while I was having brain surgery." I heard her sharp intake of breath. "Mom, I can explain." "Then explain. Explain how you looked me in the eye and lied about a work emergency. Explain how you chose a family vacation over your mother's surgery. Explain how you could post happy photos on social media while I was lying in a hospital bed wondering if anyone cared whether I lived or died." What came next was worse than the lie itself. Instead of remorse or apology, Sarah went on the attack. "You want to know the truth? Fine. Yes, we went to Disneyland. We had this trip planned for months, and the kids were so excited. David had already taken the time off work and we had already paid for everything. I wasn't going to disappoint my children and waste thousands of dollars because you decided to have surgery that week." "I decided, Sarah, I had a brain tumor. The surgery couldn't wait." My voice was shaking with disbelief. "And you're my daughter. I thought that meant something." "It does mean something, but it doesn't mean my entire life has to revolve around you. You've always been so needy, Mom. Even when I was growing up, everything had to be about you and your problems. Your divorce, your money troubles, your loneliness after Dad died. I needed this vacation with my family. I needed to focus on my own children for once instead of always having to take care of you." The words hit me like physical blows. Needy. Everything about me, I had worked 3 jobs to put her through college. I had given up dating and social opportunities to be available for her. I had spent decades putting her needs ahead of my own, and this was how she saw it. "Sarah, when have I ever been needy? When have I ever asked you for anything I didn't absolutely need?" But she was just getting started. "Are you kidding me? You call me every time there's a problem. You guilt-trip me when I can't visit every Sunday. You've never even tried to build a life that doesn't center around me and the grandkids. And now you're mad because I chose my husband and children over sitting in a hospital waiting room? That's exactly the kind of selfish behavior I'm talking about. The conversation deteriorated from there, with Sarah becoming increasingly angry and defensive while I struggled to understand how my own daughter could be so cruel. She accused me of being manipulative, of using guilt and obligation to control her life. She said I had never accepted that she was an adult with her own priorities and responsibilities. Maybe this surgery was exactly what you needed, she said with shocking coldness. Maybe now you'll finally understand that you need to build your own life instead of living through mine. I hung up on her. For the first time in my life, I hung up on my daughter. I sat in my quiet living room surrounded by the get well cards from neighbors and church friends and realized that the person I had loved most in the world saw me as a burden to be managed rather than a mother to be cherished. 20 minutes later, David called. His voice was gentle but strained. Ada, I'm so sorry about what just happened. Sarah is really upset, and I think maybe some things were said in anger that didn't come out right. David, were you planning that Disneyland trip before my surgery was scheduled? The long pause told me everything I needed to know. Yes, but Ada, we thought the surgery could be postponed. Sarah was going to talk to your doctor about rescheduling. Brain surgery isn't like a dentist appointment, David. You can't just reschedule it for a more convenient time. I could hear Sarah in the background, and David's voice became more strained. I know. Look, we're all family here. Maybe we can work this out when emotions aren't running so high. But I was done trying to work things out. I was done making excuses for Sarah's behavior. I was done accepting crumbs of affection from someone who clearly saw me as an inconvenience rather than the mother who had sacrificed everything for her happiness. That night, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible just a week earlier. I decided to protect myself the same way I would protect myself from any other person who had proven they couldn't be trusted with my heart or my well-being. I decided to treat Sarah like the stranger she had apparently become. The next morning, I called my attorney and scheduled an appointment to update my will. I called my bank and removed Sarah from my accounts. I called my doctor's office and removed her from my emergency contact list. If she wanted to be free from the burden of caring about her mother, I would grant her that freedom completely. 6 months have passed since my brain surgery, and my recovery has been remarkable. The headaches are gone, my balance is perfect, and my energy levels are better than they've been in years. Dr. Williams says the surgery was a complete success, and there's no sign of tumor regrowth. Physically, I'm healthier than I've been in a decade. Emotionally, I've been on a different kind of healing journey. The first few weeks after my confrontation with Sarah were devastating. I felt like I was grieving the death of someone who was still alive. The daughter I thought I had raised, the relationship I thought we shared, the future I had imagined for our family, all of it was gone. But slowly, painfully, I began to rebuild my life around people who actually showed up. Mrs. Patterson and I became genuine friends, sharing daily walks and weekly dinners. Margaret introduced me to her book club, and I discovered a love for contemporary fiction I never knew I had. I started volunteering at the local animal shelter where my nurturing instincts found a healthy outlet with creatures who appreciated care without taking it for granted. Most surprisingly, I joined a support group for people dealing with family estrangement. I had never imagined such a thing existed, but it turns out there are many parents whose adult children have chosen to prioritize other relationships over family loyalty. Eleanor, a 68-year-old retired nurse, became a particular source of wisdom. Her son had cut off contact when she refused to loan him money for his gambling debts. The hardest part, Eleanor told me during one of our coffee dates, is accepting that the child you raised isn't the adult they became. We can't control how they turn out, but we can control how we respond to who they've chosen to be. Through therapy and the support group, I learned to set boundaries I never thought I would need with my own daughter. When Sarah called asking me to babysit the kids during their spring break vacation, I politely declined. When she hinted that they were having financial trouble and could use help with their mortgage payment, I suggested they speak to a financial advisor. When she sent Mother's Day flowers with a card saying, "I love you," I thanked her cordially but didn't reciprocate with emotional vulnerability. The new will I created reflects my new understanding of family loyalty. Instead of leaving everything to Sarah as I had planned, I'm donating my house to a nonprofit that provides temporary housing for families dealing with medical crises. My savings will be split between scholarships for single mothers pursuing education and funding for the animal shelter where I volunteer. Sarah will receive my grandmother's china and a modest cash inheritance enough to show that I don't harbor active ill will, but not enough to reward her betrayal. Emma and Jake still visit occasionally, usually when Sarah needs a babysitter, but frames it as wanting the kids to spend time with Grandma. I love those children deeply, but I've learned to enjoy their company without allowing Sarah to manipulate my emotions through them. When Emma asks why Mommy seems upset after our phone calls, I simply say that adults sometimes disagree about things, but it doesn't change how much I love her and her brother. The most profound change has been in how I see myself. For decades, I defined my worth through Sarah's achievements and happiness. Her successes were my successes, her struggles were my failures. But at 54 years old, I'm finally learning to value myself independent of my role as her mother. I'm taking photography classes, planning a trip to Ireland, and dating a kind widower I met at the support group. Last week, Sarah called to tell me she's pregnant with her third child. Her voice carried an expectation that I would be thrilled and immediately volunteer to help with childcare during the challenging early months. Instead, I congratulated her warmly and suggested she start researching good daycare options in her area. "Mom, I thought you'd be excited about another grandchild," she said, clearly confused by my measured response. "I am excited for you and your family," I replied carefully. "I'm sure you and David will do a wonderful job managing 3 children." The silence that followed told me she finally understood that the dynamic between us had permanently changed. I was no longer the mother who would drop everything to meet her needs. I was no longer willing to prioritize her comfort over my own self-respect. I had learned that loving someone doesn't mean accepting unacceptable behavior from them. People sometimes ask me if I regret setting such firm boundaries with my only child. They want to know if I miss the relationship we used to have. The truth is, I'm not sure we ever had the relationship I thought we did. What I thought was mutual love and respect was actually a one-sided dynamic where I gave everything and she took everything she could get. Now, for the first time in my adult life, I'm surrounded by people who show up for me the way I always showed up for others. My Tuesday morning walks with Mrs. Patterson, my Thursday evening book club discussions, my Saturday volunteer shifts at the animal shelter. These activities fill my calendar with genuine connections instead of obligatory family duties. The brain tumor that seemed like such a catastrophe turned out to be a gift in disguise. It forced me to confront the reality of who Sarah had become rather than continuing to love the memory of who I hoped she still was. It taught me that sometimes the most important surgery you can have is cutting toxic people out of your life, even when those people share your DNA. I learned that being a good mother doesn't mean accepting poor treatment from your children. It means teaching them that actions have consequences and that love requires mutual respect. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the natural result of their own choices, even when those consequences are painful. My life at 54 is quieter than it was when it revolved around Sarah's needs, but it's also more peaceful. I wake up each morning knowing that the people in my life genuinely care about my well-being. I go to sleep each night without wondering if I'm being taken advantage of or manipulated. Sarah will always be my daughter, and I will always love the little girl she used to be. But I've finally accepted that the woman she became isn't someone I would choose to have in my life if we weren't related. That acceptance has been the key to my healing. Sometimes the people we love the most hurt us the deepest, not because they don't know better, but because they know we'll forgive them. Breaking that cycle of forgiveness without accountability was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the most necessary. Today, when I look in the mirror, I see a woman who values herself enough to demand basic respect and loyalty from the people she loves. I see someone who learned that protecting your heart isn't selfish, it's essential. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is teach them that treating people poorly comes with a cost, even when that person is your mother. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with someone you love? How do you balance family loyalty with self-respect when the two seem to conflict? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. Share this with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to protect your heart even from family members. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you deserve to be treated with the same kindness and respect you show to others. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video.